Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us today to stay curious on really a historic day in the space age. This is the day when the fourth landing on the moon by America, Apollo 15, took place a little after 6 in the evening, Eastern Daylight Time, back in 1971. And we're going to relive some of this beautiful vista of a lunar landing. It's my favorite because of where they landed and how things looked and the challenge of landing there in the first all up what they call J mission, this first scientific mission with three wonderful astronauts, one who's still alive today. So stay curious about all that information as our intern Logan Cope chose this beautiful green screen appropriately, human footprints in tire tracks on the lunar surface with a shadow of one of the astronauts and the feet above him there. Me and my shadow and Apollo 15 there. And these footprints and tire tracks of the first vehicle on the moon will last for millions and millions of years, believe it or not, unless humans get up there to sully them up there. So let me turn on my smart tablet here, refresh it there, see if I can get you good people saying hello to us here at the American Space Museum, us being Marty, Winkel. And let me go down here. There we are. Pop it up there. So you're going to enjoy a beautiful vista in photographs, some that you've never seen. Some I'm going to show you how you can take the raw images that are on Flickr and enhance them, like I have on all the images shown here. We're going to talk a little bit about the Genesis rock that made a lot of history. Of course, this is the mission we're not going to talk about so much, that had the stamp cancellation on the moon, where the three astronauts were going to raise money for their kids' college education, and a German stamp dealer had them take some postage to the moon and they stamped it there. That created a lot of controversy when they got back. Not going to talk about that much anymore, but and we're going to feature the artwork of our friend Doug Forrest. That's with two R's, Doug Forrest, a great pencil artist he's in the Los Angeles area, and we're going to show you some one-of-a-kind images of Doug Forrest that is going to whet your appetite to even own a few of them there. So hope to help you out a little bit, Doug, but we love all of our artists like Chris Calley, and of course the White Room guy that I'm thinking of, who's not a guitarist for the Rolling Stones, not Keith Richards, but
drawing a blank on him.
yeah, I'm drawing a blank, and we'll get his name out of my head here in just a minute. That guy. Okay.
Picture him, mate.
Yes, indeed. Sorry, I'm embarrassed. I can't remember who's the other guitarist for the Rolling Stones. And that's our other artist, and he's a snowbird up in New England right now. Mitchell, hello to you. He's saying hello to everybody, wishing Karen all the best. Karen is at home. We don't know Karen's. Karen has had 2 treatments for her cancer, and she's resting comfortably at home. And thank you, Doug. Ronnie Woods, Chris Calley and Doug Forrest are definitely our in-house photographers, along with the patch guy, Tim Gagnon. Can't leave you out, Tim. So good afternoon, Dean Babcock. I know you're going to enjoy some of the images and hopefully some of my commentary. Robert Law's watching in Dundee, Scotland. And good afternoon to Mark Usiak in Pennsylvania and Gary Gerald in Georgia. And we appreciate all your contributions to the American Space Museum, and Cliff Watson. I'll have to mention him because he's waking up on the coast of Australia right now. And thank you for your $120, mate, that you gave us on the YouTube donation button at the bottom of the recorded shows. It doesn't show it on their live. So I'm dressed here with a brand new Apollo shirt. Got that from a place called Merch. MERCH, and then there's another name to it. And they have a lot of good stuff on there if you're looking for a good shirt. So let's kick this off here with the Apollo 15 emblem there that has the astronauts' names on the bottom, Scott, Warden, and Irwin. In this Apollo 15 now, they went to a Arabic letter numbers instead of the Roman numerals. And I'll talk about that in a second. But this is a very simple patch with a lot of good meaning in it. The stylized birds, the 3 stylized birds flying over the lunar surface, represent the 3 Apollo 15 astronauts. The lunar landscape depicts the targeted landing site of Hadley Rill at the foot of the Apennine Mountains, and you see that rill on the left-hand side. This is what it makes it a really cool landing spot. The shape of the Roman numeral XV15 is visible on the crater formation on the moon's surface to the right. Would you point that out, Logan? Behind the stylized birds. Italian dress designer Emilio Pucci came up with the design, and artist Jerry Elmore created the finished art. So not sure how an Italian women's dress designer, Emilio Pucci, was involved in our American lunar program, but he was apparently. And there you see the X and the V in the lunar surface, and you can find this on the patch. And the earlier patches have it shown there really, really beautifully. And so there's a few other hidden little Easter eggs, what the artists call them in there. So we'll get to the astronauts here in a minute, but there's the moon ship, the command module, and the lunar module attached together. They had to give each one a different name when they separated. So the command module was called Endeavor with an O-U-R, and Falcon was the lunar module. And yes, they carried a falcon feather with them. Such an iconic mission. Again, pops into my head, Dave Scott, the commander, dropping a falcon feather and a hammer at the same time, and the 1/6 gravity with no atmosphere of the moon, and a feather and a hammer landed on the moon at the same moment, which is what Galileo predicted about 400 years earlier on that. So all kinds of iconic images and firsts on this mission. This is a good spot for me to say these missions featured a lunar rover equipped with a television camera, a redesigned lunar module that allowed crews to stay for up to 3 days on the moon, and of course long duration backpacks for the moonwalkers, allowing them to spend more time on the surface, up to 7 hours. Engineers also made changes to the service module. As you see here, one of the panels is removed and filled with remote sensing instruments designed to document the moon's surface. One of the cameras had film in it. That's right, celluloid film, like this roll of film here that I show you in a canister. And Al Warden had to go retrieve that canister from the back of the spaceship there. We'll show you a beautiful artwork of that. Yep, that's Fujifilm because it's green, a green case, invisible to the green screen here. So Fuji 400, I used a heck of a lot of that back in the day. And blues and greens on Fujifilm were far superior to the Kodak that tended to go to the red end of the spectrum. So Steve Jokums, thank you for watching, and Mitch Rothman of Manned Space is reminding us the first and only all Air Force crew of the Apollo program. Again, this was the first of 3 J missions, often called the true scientific missions of the moon. They put a lot of things on the moon into payloads that were scientific instruments. The Apollo 15 astronauts traveled to at different geological sites each month. One was up in Iceland, I know. 18 trips they did, compared to 5 or 6 of the previous Apollo 14. So the J missions, they did more than 3 times or 4 times the amount of field work here on Earth to practice their acumen for recognizing geology, and then also how to get it off the surface into bags and eventually into those containers that they brought back. So just want to reiterate that we do know where the Apollo landing sites are thanks to the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter that has photographed the descent stage that stayed on the moon. All right, and there you see the descent stages and shadows being cast by Apollo 11, 15, 16, and 17. Pick those out. Now, Falcon, I mean, it looks like they all look like the same area because this is only about an area of about a football field or soccer pitch that you're looking at here. So you don't get the whole picture of where Apollo 15 landed right behind the Hadley Mountains beside a collapsed lava tube. Doug Forrest, we're going to give you a lot of love today. Well deserved. Here's his website, apolloarts.com, where you can buy these beautiful pictures that I'm going to show you today. He is a pencil artist. He works in the Hollywood industry out there in Los Angeles as a graphic designer. I just talked to Doug a little this afternoon and yesterday to kind of get his insight of how he came up with some of these fabulous images that he does to depict the Apollo program. And he's always looking for a different angle that's not even depicted in photographs. So here's some of Doug's chops here. We're showing off the commander, David Scott, who's alive at age 92. Bless his heart, doing well. These are, they look just like him, Doug. Very good job. There's Jim Irwin, particularly looks like Jim there. Jim passed away, I think, at age 62, over 20 years ago of a heart attack. The first one to go, and he was very influenced on this trip in a religious way, and came back a born-again Christian, and then was very involved in that. Steve Yokums is wondering why the sound is coming from just the left channel, if you didn't see that note there.
Probably on his side.
Pardon me?
It's probably on his side.
Oh, okay.
If no one else is complaining about it.
All right. Well, we're broadcasting on both channels. So Steve, he also asked about our audio situation here. We're going to look into that and try. We've had lavalier mics before, but maybe they were too cheap, and we just will get back to up in our game here. In fact, we had a staff meeting today where that was part of the discussion of we've got to improve our equipment on Stay Curious so we can go out on the road more and make sure that everyone can hear each other. Al Warden, known as Uncle Al to those that met him, what a loving guy, what a guy that shot from the hip. You knew what he said what he meant all the time, and sometimes even being politically incorrect. But he died in 2021 or during the COVID pandemic. Very sad. I saw him about 4 months. I saw him in November trying to spit out, and he died in March 2021. So everybody that met Al Warden, very affected by him. Of course, this was the one and done mission for both Warden and Irwin, rookies. I believe there's 11 rookies that went to the moon during the 24 men who orbited the moon. And we love showing off their Corvettes. They each had a different stripe on them. Let's see. Irwin's on the left, Warden's in the middle, and that's the black Stingray there is, of course, David Scott's there. With the rover that they practice in on the around Kennedy Space Center, and that is now out at the Saturn V building. And I've looked at that in detail many, many times, like I look at the Apollo Lunar Module number 9. That is also the real deal out there. I always have a lot of swag for the Apollo flights. It's getting less and less, of course, as we sell this on eBay, but one of the cool things is a team member bumper sticker, first manned lunar roving vehicle. They actually had driver's licenses for the lunar vehicles that they passed out to workers on it and the astronauts themselves. They, of course, would thank all of the contractors with this type of thing on the top, a signed, but it's not a personalized sign. It's, of course, a printed sign lithograph of the crew. in appreciation of your support. And then they would have a replica of the flag, one of the flags they flew to the moon, and that's a picture of is it Irwin? I can't see the stripe on it, saluting the moon. Of course, the commander had the red stripes on his arms, helmet, and around his legs, so that you knew the difference between the moonwalkers. Well, here's where they landed, and you can very easily see this in a telescope, and I do every first quarter. Around first quarter, you see that. There is the yellow star right here. This is the Apennine Mountains, named after the Apennine Mountains on Earth. The first cartographers of the lunar surface chose a lot of Earth features to name on the moon. So this is the Hadley Rill, and that's Mount Hadley in the Apennine Mountains. Hadley Sea is the mountain that they had to come over. They actually came from at the top of the picture down over the sea of Hadley Sea, over that mountain, and landed a spot right near this. Looks like a river, but actually it's a collapsed lava tube, one of the half a dozen or so that are prominently on the moon. So we knew that volcanism in one of these mountains was a volcano at one time. And this is just a gorgeous view, and what a daring place to go. There is the Hadley Rill, okay, if you will. The landing site's about right in here where my hand is. They popped up over this from the left and landed down there. This is a view of that as they passed over on one of their passes before they did the wonderful landing attempt. Bob Pearson, rest in peace, a great friend of our museum. He trained all of the astronauts how to land on the moon. Bob, we miss you dearly. Again, another person that died during the COVID pandemic. Not going to say he died of COVID, but I think it was a contributing factor. He's showing the landing site pointed right there. These were kind of fiberglass reliefs that he was giving, because they had a much larger one of these where the astronauts would train, and with a video camera, and outside the triangular window they would actually see the recreated landing site. And Bob said they had a lot of fun with that. Of course, the resolution would be different until they got down to the moon. And then this was at the Flight Crew Training Building, the most popular spot at the time, where all the dignitaries wanted to go and practice landing on the moon, as the German chancellor did. And they put a Volkswagen on the moon when he got down to the surface, to where you could see that resolution. Then for a delegate of France, they put the Eiffel Tower on the moon. And so when they got down to the landing and he saw that Eiffel Tower, he was, oui, our Eiffel Tower. So that was appropriate to talk about with the Paris Olympics going on here. But Bob really knew his stuff. He claimed to know all the astronauts better than anybody, and he probably did. And there's a book that when he passed away, his family's got the manuscript of. So hope they do something with that. But we do miss you, Bob. He worked with Hazel Banks. Hello, Hayes. I know you're happy to see your buddy there. Really a great person. And we did some Stay Curiouses. We did some interviews with him that I think we posted on YouTube. We never really got him on a proper Stay Curious program. All right, we're going to go from there to, again, the landing site in an artist's conception. What a bold move to come over that mountain, land right there where it says site. Then having the first lunar rover and being in kind of a mountainous area, David Scott wanted to do something that he got a lot of argument over, and that is standing up out of the docking hatch and looking at his surroundings, which from 23 feet up seemed like a smart thing to do. Like, this is an elevated version here of that. I want to say hi to Tom Usiak. That was his first mission. He covers a college photographer. I did not put that picture in here, Tom. I meant to, of his beautiful launch, but we did show that earlier in the week, where he had the launch of Apollo 15 on there. And and also Tom Celentano, he's online, remembering 15 very well. Dean Babcock met Dave Scott and Al Warden. So tell us about that sometime, Dean, when you're in our museum. And he's wanting to know, did the crew ever train with the actual lunar rover used on the moon? And I'm going to give that a hard no, Dean. Why? Because if they sat in it, it would probably collapse, right, Marty?
Definitely get 4 flat tires.
Yeah, you'd have 4 flat tires, Marty said in the background here. As we know, the lunar module, though it weighed what? 5 tons? Something like that.
33,000.
It was, you could not walk up and down the ladder of any of the lunar rovers on Earth because you would crush them. They were made to the 1/6 gravity of the moon. So if they had a trainer that they took to the moon, it would have been broken by the 1g gravity here because it was only built for 1/6 gravity. But good question there, and a good thing to always remember that everything that goes to space is made to work in space, not on Earth. And that includes the doors of the space shuttle, all right, that were made lighter for the space thing and had to be opened up by putting some strongbacks, they called, on them there. Again, a photograph I took of the moon's surface. I love looking at this whole area of the moon. I can name you all kinds of features there. That's but right at the very top you see is a cut through the mountains. That's the Apennine Mountain, Apennine Valley. Okay, and then you see a crater that looks like it's covered up almost with lava. That's right, it almost got flooded in by lava because this whole area was filled in with lava at some point 3 billion years ago. And these little mountain peaks, they're like Pico is the one there in the center there. Those are jutting up out of the lava. And that one's called Cassini, that's got the 2 craters inside of it. Archimedes is Apollo 15 landed about right where you see that dot there. Incredible, so close to those mountains, but right there's where a lava rill was. And they also wanted to get some of the crust out of the early moon crust that would have been ejected out of this impact basin that was created those mountains. Mountains on the moon are different than mountains on the Earth. Why is that? Mountains on the Earth are created by tectonic plates crashing into each other. On the moon, there's no tectonic plates, so the lunar mountains are created by upheavals of impacts from asteroids in the early days of the moon. And I know an astronomer would argue all day long there's no mountains on the moon. They're all just shorelines of the impact of giant asteroids. And when you're a stargazer and a moon gazer like me, you realize that big time. So here's a snapshot of the landing within minutes, a few seconds of landing on the moon. They all look the same when you're close up there. And the same is everywhere you look are craters on craters on craters, all right? Even down when they got on the surface, there were still craters just inches in diameter, all right, everywhere. This is because there's no atmosphere on the moon. And meteoroids, the debris that's orbiting the Earth that we talked about with meteor showers yesterday on Stay Star Curious, these objects don't have any atmosphere to slow them down, so they go from meteoroid to meteorite on the surface. There's no meteor because that's burning up in the atmosphere. That's what we call meteors. So they land on the moon, they check everything out, ready to go, and here is a beautiful print by Doug Forrest, and this is SEVA, EVA, SEVA. Now, I'm not going to get into it too much because we don't want to have a super long program, but Dave Scott had to argue with the NASA folks whether to do this EVA or not. I think it was probably in the flight plan to do it if things worked out, but they were this is the docking hatch that they were taking out for him to stand up on. They were worried that dust might get in the ring of the docking hatch. Of course, there's no atmosphere to blow dust up that high. He's 23 feet in the air. But Commander Scott is the only astronaut to do this. And he and Doug Forrest, when he did this sketch, he told, he shared with me just this afternoon, Doug did, that he talked to Dave Scott. And Dave talked about that he put a 500 millimeter lens on that beautiful Hasselblad 500C camera and then did a panorama shot. But he really wanted to look around and see where to drive the rover. He was worried that the resolution from the lunar orbiters and Apollo 8 and Apollo 10 and other 11 and 14 hadn't shown, well, number one, 11, 12, and 14 did not go up above this high area of the moon. Those three landed around the equator. So we had very little data there from lunar orbiters about what the surface was down like at a resolution of 3 feet or so. He was worried there was a lot of boulders, so he wanted to look around and see where he was going to drive. All right. This initial survey of geology at Hadley Base was the first ever, popping out like that. This is a 20 by 16 that Doug Forrest did on velvet fine art paper with his pencils. He's such a master with the graphite, if you will. And unframed, this is $200 to help our buddy out there. And I'm going to buy one of these one day off of you. That's one of my favorite ones right there. So you see antenna around there. All right, look at the antenna that Doug Forrest has put in this sketch of his. Not a sketch, it's a lot more than a sketch, of course. And these are the actual photographs that Dave Scott took with that 500 millimeter lens, all right. Obviously pales in comparison to being there, but he looked in that direction. Marty, what antenna is that?
That's the S-band.
That's the S-band antenna that would communicate with the Earth?
Yes.
Or with the Earth. That's the main Earth. And then he moved a little bit there, looking in another direction over Hadley Mountain. That's not the mountain he shot over. That's a mountain in the distance. Look at those aren't rivets. Those are all screws, Marty.
No, they're rivets.
Oh, they are rivets. So why don't you scoot a little closer there and pop that microphone on? You know, that UCAC family microphone, Marty. So tell us what's in the foreground there.
That's the S-band antenna.
Okay.
And
And it goes in that direction. That's another antenna, right? I'll bet that's the docking antenna there on the upper left.
It's not a docking antenna. It looks like a docking mechanism, but it can't be.
It does, doesn't it? Would he have set that on top up there?
No. It would be inside the lunar module.
Yeah. And there he is looking in another direction. There you see two antennas, left and right. That one there. What are those, Marty?
UHF antennas.
Okay.
I think the one on the right is the one that communicates with the orbiter.
Command module.
Yeah. And the other ones are communicating on ground.
All right. Thanks, Marty. Now, they always wanted to land in the morning when the shadows are long, lunar morning. So the Terminator, the difference between night and day is just along there. So when they stayed 3 days there, they actually saw the shadows inside these craters get shallower as time went on there. So, all right, I'm going from there to Dave Scott's EVA, stand-up EVA, SIVA. There's the final picture on there. Now I'm showing you the frame of the film taken there, all right? And these pictures are on Flickr, Apollo Archives Flickr. I've talked about it many times. One place I've ignored a lot is the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal. That is the Bible of every word spoken on the moon, Apollo Lunar Surface Journal. Doug Forrest was telling us that he, in doing a couple of his other Apollo 15 pieces of artwork we're going to see here, consulted with that to get the lingo of what the astronauts were talking about on there. So, and I'm going to show you some of these in the raw that are on the website of Apollo Lunar Archives on Flickr, and then how you can enhance them, crop them any way you want. Well, folks, this is a real lunar module that was intended for Apollo 15. That was not going to be a J mission, but then everything had gone so well that they decided, well, we're going to take the first rover, and we're not going to need this one anymore because we built it without putting a rover in the quad here. The compartment wasn't put in there for it. It was kind of a Murphy's bed where a Murphy's bed is a bed that's in the wall that pulls out, and then it's 4 posts of feet hit the ground there, spring loaded, so to speak. So this was taken off of the suspended from the ceiling at the Saturn V Center at NASA's Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex and put down on the ground here in the foreground there. All right, in a beautiful diorama with astronauts and everything you're going to see there. There's a good shot of the Saturn V Center, the Apollo 15 emblem just above us there. Some of this is real deal and some of it's mock-up, but it's all the real size and just overwhelming to see. So here is the mock-up of tail number lunar module number 9. Number 9 is what it was. So number 10 is the one that made it to the moon. There's the landing. And if it's the real deal, they had to be careful with it, Marty, that it could it even support its own weight on the Earth. I think you told me they have support structures under this.
They do, right. It's not on the landing legs.
All right, it's not on the landing legs because it would collapse on itself. All right, in one gravity. This is made for 1/6 gravity. So if you're 100 pounds, you'd weigh about 18 pounds on the moon, something like that. But these are those are mannequins. Those aren't hired Space Center employees to walk around there. But how cool would that be? All right, that you have a couple people hired to be in different shifts out there. But they got some rocks around there to show it. And there's the Lunar Rover with the astronauts checking it out there with the technicians. The legs folded up. It was an origami type of thing where the legs had to fold up, the seats folded up, everything had to fold up and go in that quad 4 of the lunar module. There again is the descent stage. What you're looking at me, Marty? Was it quad 4?
I was just going to mention the legs don't fold up; they fold in underneath the chassis.
The rovers, the rover wheels, not leg. They fold up in and under the chassis. You're saying? Okay, so they're still folding it up here. Of course, they had fenders on it because of the rooster tails. By the way, this is 1971. There was no gas-powered machine on this. It was all electric. So think of the technology of 1971 to take a car to the moon that is an electric car with batteries. And now 50-some years later, we've got a lot of electric cars on the road. Yeah, Marty?
Marky, you can actually see back here, you can see the wheels folding in under the chassis. This is the bottom part of the chassis.
Okay. All right. Oh, I got you. Yeah, that's the bottom part. I see that. So they're actually, the seats are on the other side, right?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So they're kind of putting it in there like that. So, and we got some Tom Usiak is enjoying Doug's artwork. Of course, they've met each other many times here at the museum as well as out at the Once a Time Space Fest. Was there concern for the lunar liftoff due to the angle the LEM landed at? And so, yes, it was at a big incline. We're going to see that, but it was within acceptable limits, Dean, as we've talked about that. And Mark Usiak said, Marty, I've always wondered why the last rung of the ladder was up so high, up the leg up there. And he's absolutely right. As you look there, Marty, you want to answer that question?
Yeah, they actually thought because the LEM free fall for the last 6 feet, and they thought there'd be more compression of the landing legs and maybe even the pads going deeper into the lunar surface.
But none of the commanders piloting it, cut off at like 6 feet above, which was contact light.
Yeah.
Oh, I swear most of them didn't turn that engine off till they were on the surface. But you can check the transcripts for that. Okay. But yeah, they were supposed to, when they had contact light, drop it down. And there was quite a lot of shock absorber there. And Neil landed so gently that there was no shock absorber on it down there. But they were actually supposed to like crash that last feet there. So, but then I guess they never put another rung there, Marty, as they just told it. But Marty's right that the they could only go down so far because that's where the engine bell was, and they didn't want it didn't bother to crush the engine bell, except it might have disturbed the lunar module and tipped it over, right, Marty?
Yeah, the engine bell was crushable, but there's always concern about implosion.
Oh, okay. All right. From any of the hypergolic fuels left inside of it there. Good point there. Good question. Keep them coming. Apollo 15 had the hardest landing, is what Doug Forrest is saying. And he's not only a great artist, but he is a great historian of things that he's looked up there. So there's the Lunar Rover where it was set for the ascent. The first time we got to see when they lifted off the moon, they left the camera on at Houston for about a day afterwards even, and we could see the liftoff. And then the Apollo Lunar Science Experiment project was all set up over there on the left-hand side there. So look at the craters that they had to overcome to land in that spot. There is the tilt that Dean was talking about, Dean Babcock. The angle was quite a bit severe there. The Lunar Rover on the other side, right here, they're unpacking the Lunar Rover right there, aren't they, Marty, I think? As you can see, it was higher up than what they thought it would be. So it was actually on the high side, but it got down just nicely in there. But look at that crater that they're on the edge of there. When we talk about landing on the moon again, all of the 6 landings, they had a footpad within a few feet of a crater that would have had them tipping a little bit more, not tipping over. But I want you to look at where the legs are on this vehicle. They are on the outside of the body. All right. We had 2 lunar missions, uncrewed, unmanned, this year that both landed, one by India and one by the American private company Intuitive Machines, and they both tipped over. And when you look at how those lunar landers were built, the legs are underneath the body, tucked underneath the body, not like the Surveyor unmanned spacecraft that had them splayed out, 3 triangular shaped legs on the unmanned Surveyor that proved we could land on the moon. So look at the legs are way outside there, just so that it would allow them to land even on unsteady areas. So there's a classic photo there. Just so cool to think that Marty, our co-producer here for 4 years, walked around this lunar module on the moon. I hope you can make a trip back, Marty, to see one of them as a tourist someday. We may have to keep you alive like Ted Williams. Cut your head off, and I'm just joking. I love this photograph because it shows you the RTG. This is the nuclear source of power for their ALSEP experiments. Yes, thank you, Logan. Show back in the distance is the Lunar Rover with an astronaut beside it. Okay, so the other astronaut is up near here. So you know what? I know that that's Dave Scott. You know why I know that, Marty? Because he was the only one that drove the rover, and he wasn't going to walk back that far. In fact, none of the other pilots were allowed to drive the rover. And I even asked Charlie Duke that one time if he drove the rover, and he said no, he didn't. Only the commanders were allowed to drive the rover. And I go, oh, come on. You know, John Young didn't say, hey, take this around the block for a quick spin. He says, nope. We didn't even ask that question. It wasn't even in the training. This rope that you see tethered, that comes back to Earth, and a lot of, we have a card from Apollo 14 where they put some of that on there. But once again, what's the black stuff? All of you stay curious Apollo lovers out there, the black stuff, gray stuff, is called Inconel. All right, the initials of the materials they're made out of. Then to the right of that, the real gold is Kapton foil. All right, that's Kapton foil. And then on the leg, on the far left, Logan, is the Mylar. Now, Logan, go up to the top above, to the right, to that opening over there, a little bit more, right there, a little bit further. That is the ascent engine opening for the exhaust right there at the back side of it. And I was kidding with Steve Jokums, who has a model decal business called Lake County Spaceport, that I didn't see many models with this depicted on the back, and then he sent me a bunch of them. So I'll show you to those one time there. But yeah, to be accurate, you got to have that gap opening there, and you can see the ascent engine, and we're going to get another shot of that here in a minute. But as you know, we're human beings, and as you can look around, they can't help but leave the litter everywhere. No one's going to clean up after them. This is from Google Moon, all right? And I haven't been to Google Moon in a couple years, and I hope they still have it there. But you could go on the moon with the Apollo missions, and this is where the rover was. And then at each point here where a camera is where they show you a picture that the astronauts took. So they go over to the Hadley Rill, which is a collapsed lava tube. This was not a flowing river of lava, nor was it any water. It was a lava tube that collapsed. And there's the picture from that point, all right, taken by one of the astronauts. Can't really tell which. It looks like that's Irwin because he doesn't have the stripes on him there. But look at the boulders. And as they were there, the sunlight would get higher and reveal more into the bottom of the lunar rill, they call them, R-I-L-L-E, lunar rill. See that right there where the elbow is? That's elbow. They call it the elbow, is where he ended up there. How cool is that? Here's another wonderful shot, wonderful piece of artwork by Doug Forrest. This is called Green Rock, Rockin' Rover. During the Apollo 15 second EVA, at the sixth station the astronauts went to, they were surprised to find a light green layer in a large boulder on the Apennine front. And I'm going to make that smaller so you see that's Scott at a boulder there. And in the background is Irwin. And if you notice, that rover is just on 3 wheels. The dust was particularly deep on the slope and difficult to walk in the bulky spacesuits. After parking, it was noticed that the rover, which was precariously balanced on only 3 wheels, slipped downhill. All right, when the astronauts got out of it, it started sliding down. To counteract this, pilot Jim Irwin knelt down and held the rover in place while Commander Scott photographed and took samples of the rock, which were later found to contain a high abundance of magnesium oxide-rich green glass spheres. Green glass spheres only come from the emitting of lava out of a volcano. Now, these volcanoes on the moon weren't necessarily cone volcanoes. They were fissure volcanoes where cracks open and spewed stuff in there. All right. So this is called the high point of this. Okay. And it shows Dave Scott sampling the green rock found there while Jim kneels in the dirt and holds onto the rover. This was stopping the slipping down the precarious slope. All right. So Mount Hadley's in the upper left. All right, where to go there? There you go. Mount Hadley's in the upper left that they came over, and Swan Range is to the right, and immediately in front of that are craters called the South Cluster that they visited there. So this is again a 15 by 19 print that Doug sells for $200, and you can go to his website. I'll show it again, apolloarts.com. So you're going, well, that'd be a neat idea to do a depicting Irwin holding that rover from slipping around. And look at this beauty that Doug did. Just the opposite direction. There you see Scott looking down at Irwin. And then he's taking pictures and looks up at Irwin. And now there's a transcript of this on the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal. All right. That Doug said he consulted to get things accurately here. But a lot of detail in there with a pencil, different shadings, different graphite things going on there. And this was the second EVA, so they're pretty dirty already. And look at how Irwin is trusting that spacesuit to get down on his knees, which he actually did. So that's a 15 by 19, also for $200. So Beautiful stuff there by Doug Forrest, and we'll show you where you can order that stuff here at the end of the program. Now, let me show you some pictures that are from the Apollo uh, archives on Flickr. I just love this because they show the film strips in order that they took the pictures. Now, the first thing you photographers out there are going to notice are they overexposed everything. Everything is way too bright. They probably should have gone 1,000th of a second instead of 500th, I think they went at. The ISO of the film was probably pretty low, like 100. But there are the rover tracks of where they set up the ALSEP station. This is the original on that Flickr Apollo archives. That's the original that you see. And then with a little Photoshop, which is just what you do in a dark room, lighten and darken and dodge and burn a little bit if you can. It actually does look like that. There's another beautiful shot with the footprints, Hadley Mountain in the background. These rover tracks and footprints are going to last for millions, maybe a billion years. The only thing that's going to deteriorate them are micrometeorites hitting them and just pulverizing them down. Look at this incredible photograph of Apollo 15. That is the lander. Why don't you highlight that for me, Logan? You see where the lander is right there. And they're about 3 miles away at this point. They went as far as like 5 miles away, I think, out of sight. But there is Falcon. All right, the only way to get home. And look at this telephoto lens going across the landscape. All right, keep it right there, Logan, because this is what it looks like when you first see it on that Flickr. And you're going like, dang, they need to do another contact sheet and make it darker there. But you could play with them all you want, okay? And isn't that cool? Look at how much detail's in there. Crop them, play with them. You'll see classic shots of Apollo 11, that visor shot of Buzz Aldrin. That's about 2/3 of the frame. The other third of the frame, you can see the leg in it there. So I love showing that for all you photographers out there. And then, of course, they drilled into the lunar surface down to about 4 or 5 feet with, how did they use the drill? All right, what kind of drill did they use? They used an electric drill like you buy at any Ace Hardware or your local hardware store, okay? Pioneering, again, 53 years ago, electronic tools. Marty, I don't think there's even a tool that you can buy that has an electric cord on it anymore. Are there? Yeah. Marty said, yeah, there are. Okay, but very few. When you're looking at them, there's just a few that got the cord on it, and then the rest are all powered. And you know what? I mowed my front yard yesterday with an electric powered lawnmower that I'll never own anything else. And I got about half of it done. The battery went out, so I had to go in and cool off. I just grabbed another battery that was charging in the workshop and slapped that in and continued right away. And I always think about the Apollo guys when I do that. I said, man, how cool is this that this battery, this Nikon battery that weighs so little, was pioneered over half a century ago by these guys. Also, look at the different headgear they have on the helmet. They used more shading, okay, because they were going to be out there. They got some information from the other 3 moonwalkers, or rather 6 moonwalkers on 3 moon landings. Yeah, thank you, Logan. Look at those little visors there, like you'd put in your car window to keep the sun out of the way so they can see things on there. So, but they trained for this on Earth, you betcha. There's one of the Apollo 15 Africa. That's Dave Scott, because he's got the stripes on, practicing right outside of the Kennedy Space Center, probably flight crew training building back in there. I'd like for you to point out where they did train there, Marty. I think one time we took the bus tour, you pointed out that was the area where they did their training. But as I make that smaller, look at what he's drilling into. All right, he's got to actually put he's way down deep in there. So, but they practice this, and you know what? That's where they got the confidence in the EVA suits, because they were in them for days on end on Earth.
Look, I think that was at JSC, I think. It wasn't here.
You think that was at Johnson Space Center?
Yeah, or it could be New Mexico.
Okay.
It wasn't here.
Yeah, they had training facilities at both, though, I know. But yeah, that's good there. So, and of course, they had special spacesuits that they use for these training purposes. And Fred Hayes's is at the Infinity Space Museum on the Louisiana-Mississippi border near Stennis facility there. I've seen it. And it's beat the heck, too. Oh, my God, is it beat up like crazy? Me and my shadow. There, I'll bet you didn't know that they were doing a little butterfly catching up there. See, they got a butterfly net there, one of the astronauts does. Yeah, here you go. Actually, of course, that was a rake that they would rake up particles and so forth. These are very important. That little, this is a black and white. That's got a color sheet on it there that gives accurate rendition of color on the pictures. So one of the rocks brought back became a very, very famous rock. And this is the sequence of where I've heard about the Genesis rock, called the Genesis rock because though Apollo 16 and 15 and 17, 16 and 17, the two after this brought back some rocks that may have been a little bit older than this one. They were trained geologists now, and Scott on the transcript says, "Hey, guess what we just found? Guess what I just found? I think we found what we came for. A sample of the moon's early crust, the primordial crust, the first crust over the moon when those lava oceans that are dark in our night sky froze up. They wanted to see what was churned out of those on the side of the mountains. Like I said, the mountains are merely pushed up surface that formed mountain peaks. So this is the Genesis rock, a series of them seeing it. Okay, they could tell right away it had white on it. I thought this rock was like a football size rock. Okay, I really did. But no, it's only about 6 inches, less than 6 inches across. There's a close-up of it, which that close-up makes it look like a football, but it's not. There's one of those gnomes, the color gnomes there that they use to color coordinate everything. But you can see it's got a crust on it. It's covered with lunar soil from the micrometeorite bombardment and other, when something hit the moon, it threw stuff up in the air, but it went down immediately on top of things. So there is the oldest rock, one of the oldest rocks, named the Genesis rock, was an anthracite, a piece of the moon's primordial crust. While not the oldest rock brought back from the moon, geologists at Johnson Space Center concluded this rock was about 4B with a billion years old. Now, the entire solar system is thought to be under 5 billion years old, and they think it took at least 100, 200, 300 million years to coalesce out of that once the star became our sun and ignited everything. So 4 billion years. We find a few things on Earth 4 billion years, but not many. All right, but this is one of the oldest rocks found on the moon. And then there's a classic picture of it. Had kind of white mica on it there, 6 centimeters or a little over 3 inches per centimeter. So it's kind of a small rock. It would fit in your hand. And there's David Scott looking at it right there, where my finger is, at the Lunar Receiving Lab. And I always love seeing the pictures of the astronauts where they could go see the rocks that they scooped up. And the geologists might be asking them some questions about, how they were sitting and all that. So, of course, this was way back. This was a couple of weeks after they'd returned from the moon. And this mission was not quarantined at all. Got to talk about the Apollo Lunar Science Experiment Package, the ALSEP. This was the control station that everything went into it with these ribbon type of connectors there, kind of familiar to some of you that are in the computer industry. On Apollo 16, John Young tripped over that, and the heat flow experiment was compromised and didn't work. So, but there's some of the experiments on top. That's obviously Irwin in the background because he doesn't have stripes on his suit. Just look how dirty his feet get. This is like charcoal, fine talcum powder charcoal that smells like spent gunpowder or a wet fireplace after it burned, say all of the astronauts. There's a couple other experiments there. They're recording Earth moonquakes. They're recording any transient gas that might be on the moon. They thought that some of the areas outgassed from inside molten lava in the moon, but we never really confirmed that. And a laser reflector on the moon. Those are individual lasers, individual polished mirrors that from the Earth, a laser pointed there would hit that and reflect back to the Earth and take a half a second there and a half a second back, and then you can accurately determine how far away the moon is to the inch. And if you're a fan of the Big Bang Theory sitcom with the astro nerds that work at Jet Propulsion Lab, you'll be there was an episode where they bounced off their apartment roof through a telescope, a laser that hit the moon and back. One of my favorite versions there. Let's see. Robert Law says they used a 1G Earth version for training. Dean Babcock, of course. Did the astronauts fear crashing into the nearby mountains? All right. And, well, yeah, they did a little bit, but, you know, the 3 previous missions had really honed in the fabulous spacecraft that the lunar module was. It responded to their every move. It flew beautifully. All the astronauts just raved about how flying the only spacecraft ever built to work in the vacuum of space, land on another world, come off of that other world, be launched off that other world, and not able to come into the Earth, back on Earth at all because it didn't have a reentry shield, and be piloted by a crew that stood up the whole time because seats were eliminated for weight purposes. That is the lunar module built by Grumman, and our friend Marty Winkel had a part of that. Tom Celentano said that he met Irwin a couple times at Washington, D.C. Jim Irwin did an appearance in Connecticut a few months before he died, and Dave Scott's the only one I had to travel across the country to meet. Apollo 17 holds the record distance traveled from the lunar module at 5 miles. Thank you, Manned Space, which is Mitchell for that. About 4 miles, I think, they ventured out on the other 2. What company developed the electric drill used? Asked Dean Babcock. Well, there's a promotional consideration worth some money to our museum, I think. Don't know if it's Black & Decker. That would be the logical choice because there was no Humatsu or Koboto or anything in the 1950s, or 50 years ago, to my knowledge. But Marty's going to fact check that for us. Who built the electric drill on there, and why didn't they promote that more back on Earth? Well, let's take a quick look at that lunar module, tail number 9, out at the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex, Saturn V Center, the real deal. I know I threw that in because I love looking at that window or that doorway and just thinking 3 times Jim Irwin and David Scott climbed down and climbed up that ladder and into the home safety of the lunar module. You know, they had to just be sweaty as could be, tired. In fact, I think on the first or second EVA, Jim Irwin's orange drink straw failed, and he had to work over 5 hours on the moon without sipping a piece of liquid. So just imagine being on the desert and not getting a drink of water. That could have compromised his health a little bit. They definitely had potassium shortages, both astronauts, so they upped the potassium on Apollo 16. And guess what they used for potassium was orange juice. They made the Apollo 16 astronaut John Young and Charlie Duke drink extra orange juice for more potassium. It gave John Young the gas, all right? And there's some kind of off-color comments about that by John Young, about him having to expel gas frequently and then smelling it in his own helmet, sort of thing. So hopefully he went nose blind pretty quickly there. Marty, did you figure out what company made the electric drill?
You were right, Black & Decker.
Black & Decker. Well, that just makes sense. They were the most popular 50 years ago on there. Here is the back side of that lunar module, and the opening up there is where the vent is to allow exhaust of the upper stage to vent out. They had a lot of concerns about the blowback on that. Now you see those little panels there above there, the 4 strips of panels on the ascent engine there. Now you know why you see them peeled back on the famous picture of Apollo 16. We'll use this when we talk about Apollo 16 in April, Marty, on that, or maybe I'll show that later in the week. Yeah, that actually peels back and curls up because the exhaust coming out there. And it's a real famous picture of Apollo 16, and you're like going, "Oh my God, that thing about fell apart," but not at all. Yes, Marty.
Mark, I could be wrong and you could be right, which would be unusual, but I think it actually exhaust got inside the bay and it kind of buckled out. It didn't bend the way you described. I think it just buckled out.
Okay, buckled out. With buckled, but still, it looks like someone took a can opener and started peeling it up a little bit there. Yeah, but a lot of violent activity going on in 16G. And though I won't live long enough, I know that some of your grandchildren will, like Dave Stangy's little beautiful Mia granddaughter. They will live to go back and maybe see pictures up close of it. Steve Joachim says the drills were made by Martin Marietta Aerospace, according to the Smithsonian. So we will. That's a good thing for us to research and talk about later there. Thank you, Steve, for checking into that. And hello, Cliff Watson. Good morning to you in Pomona, Australia. Hope your brekkie has got some good protein, maybe some kangaroo bacon in it or something. Don't know about that, but thank you, Cliff. Cliff sent us $120 cold cash yesterday, and we appreciate that a lot. He did that by just going to the tab on YouTube at the bottom. Not on the live version of our show going on right now. You got to go see yesterday's show or wait for this to upload. And then there's a little $sign with a thanks button on it. And we do thank you, Cliff, and hope you're doing well on there. And Cliffy says it's bloody cold there in Australia, which, yep, they're in the middle of winter as we're in the dog days of summer here, brother. And it is hot and humid. And I don't know about you, Marty, but I'm just about had enough of it. I love Florida, but we got August ahead of us too here. So, yeah, I saw the temperatures in the 30s and 40s there. Pomona is on the west coast of Australia, right above Brisbane, which is in the middle of the country there. So appreciate you, Cliff. There's a close-up view. I guess I'm a little over-obsessed with that opening there underneath there. But I always like this Inconel. This Inconel is like a, Marty, I don't know what it came on a roll or whatever, but it's like taking aluminum foil and just kind of crushing it down around there to make it. And is that what y'all did? You didn't do that, I know, because you weren't a structural engineer. You, pardon me?
There's no wires going to it.
Yeah, there's no wires or fluid going. Yeah, no wires going through it. So Marty didn't touch it. So, and he wasn't a structural engineer. He's an electrical engineer. There's the liftoff. That was so exciting to watch. I forget what time of day it was, but I know Walter Cronkite had that on left. Yeah, Cliff says I keep saying West Coast. I mean East Coast. The West Coast, he'd be there with those Aborigine Indians out there. Yeah, the East Coast over by New Zealand side, of course. So, but thank you, Cliff, for watching us every day and telling your mates to do so. Of course, you don't see any flame coming out of there, so this has to be a hoax, right? In there, of course, you're not going to see a flame. There's no nothing on the moon that could have that. You see the mylar shredding off of it in there, and just a great shot. On the far left of it is the one hypergolic fuel tank. Here are the guys. I think I meant to show this earlier, but that's okay. Here are the guys around all of the ALSEP stuff that they were going to deploy on the moon. All kinds of photo sessions. Of course, if this was a trainer, it'd be a lot heavier than the one on the moon, but they had to practice everything from even putting the flag out there. So left to right, Jim Irwin, Al Warden, and of course, Dave Scott. There is Al Warden orbiting the moon, as seen from the lunar module, and all of the array of this science instrument bay, SIM bay they call it, science instrument science instrument. I wonder what M stood for. Mission, but I know they call it the SIM bay. So he's got film out there that's got valuable pictures of the Apollo 16 landing site, maybe Apollo 17's proposed landing site. So Al Warden had to do a spacewalk. Now he's tethered with an oxygen tank going to him. And I remember talking to Al about this. I'm looking at the blistering there, Marty, on the command module. Does that look like blisters there? I've never heard anybody talk about that. Al Warden says these two guys spent 3 days on the moon and take all the pictures, and there's one friggin' picture of me they took, and this is it, doing a spacewalk. Yeah, those look like blisters to me, Marty.
I don't think so. I think that's probably part of the service module.
Part of the service module looks like that?
But again,
Okay.
you could be right.
Yeah, well, we got some smart people there watching today. They may have an insight into that. But there's the one picture they took of Irwin, and that's what he said to me personally. I met him a couple times, and he goes to me, they took all those pictures on the moon. They took one friggin' picture of me, but he didn't use the word friggin'. And I think he said something, all you can see is my boots.
I think he said his feet, but it might be boots.
Yeah, his boots there. So, well, we took care of that. Mr. Doug Forrest did for you there, Al Warden. And there is an unreal picture of this experience. Okay. Now, I don't know what spacesuit he's wearing. Doug's got dirt depicted on that. So I don't know if but he's got the commander's helmet on. All right. Because it's got the stripe on it. Doug Forrest said the service modules were painted and did blister. Jim McDivitt told me about that. So thank you, Doug Forrest, who also did an awesome picture of Jim McDivitt holding a picture up there. You can see it all on his website soon there. But though it looks like he's working out with a barbell or something, that's the canister, like I showed you here on a film canister. This is the canister that films in. Of course, that's Fuji because it's green. It rolls up in there. And you've got, this is the sensitive silver halide crystals that Sir John Herschel invented. And then you just use a plastic back. And then, so this is what was in that on his left hand there. And very dangerous. This was not an easy thing to do, but he was the first astronaut to do a interspace walk. He was something like over 200,000 miles away from Earth when he got out and did this. He said there wasn't much time to look around. He wished he had a camera with him to take a picture. But he says, I did look up and look at the moon, but he said, I've been looking at the moon for 3 days. Okay. And it looked the same. But what an awesome photo that is. Trans-Earth, the first deep space EVA performed by command module pilot Al Warden to retrieve the film and check the equipment on the science instrument module. If I read my notes here, Sim Bay. And the EVA lasted 38 minutes and 12 seconds. So almost 40 minutes outside looking around. And Doug made this a 16 by 21 glycee print. And he sells that for $200. So there is Al Warden. It's a picture I took of him when I met him, and he had a lot of cool things to talk about. He was very instrumental in getting the handprints of many of the astronauts at Spaceview Park with Charlie Mars. Charlie Mars was the NASA manager of the Apollo astronauts associated with the lunar module as well as the command module, and he knew they knew each other very, very well. Of course, Charlie Mars, our godfather, is still around. Al, I think he was 84 when he passed away, but boy, looked in great health then. And talking to one of the students at the Florida Institute of Technology, where he was part of a panel that talked about Apollo. And I remember saying, "Hey, Al, Charlie Mars says that you were very helpful in getting lots of the handprints of the astronauts in bronze." And he put his arm around me, pulled me close to him, and you tell Charlie Mars, that SOB, he wouldn't have got hardly any of them if it wasn't for me. And then laughed. And that's just the type of guy he was. So Cliff Watson says, everyone send them some money. They need to keep going. So thanks a lot. Nick Sedler likes your artwork there, Doug. And thank you all for contributing today. So there's the great Al Warden. We do miss him. The twice times I met him, I wish I'd met him more and been around him more. But he certainly championed the Apollo program and going back to the moon. Rest in peace, Uncle Al. One of the most famous stamps came out of this, U.S. postage stamps, the double stamp, which was first done by artist Paul Calley. Our friend Chris Calley's father did the spacewalk of Ed White, and the photos taken by Jim McDivitt. That was the first double stamp. It was an airmail stamp at 10 cents, I think, or whatever. 8-cent stamp in 1971. Is it even 58 cents now? It might be 60 cents for a stamp. Who knows? Who cares? No one mails letters anymore. But this was Robert McCall and not Chris Calley. This is a Robert McCall masterpiece. I particularly like how he's got the sun in the background and all that on there. So a very cool stamp. And not to leave Chris out and his father Paul, Chris and his dad did these postal covers that were postmarked in 1994 when this stamp was issued. But this is Jim Irwin on the moon. But Paul Calley and Chris Calley, father and son, did that stamp together for the 25th anniversary of the moon landing. All right, I guess that'd be the 35th anniversary. 3 and 9, and yeah. So this is the David Scott on the moon there. Though Chris, you didn't put his stripes on his arms and legs. Uh-oh. But I do love this a lot. It's got a lot of motion in it, in there with the astronaut, and the gold visor matches the gold that he and his dad did on that stamp in 1994. And getting to the home stretch here, just wanted to show a couple pictures that I think are great from the mission. Another visor shot where Jim Irwin is shown on the passenger seat, and in the foreground is the web seat of the Lunar Rover as seen through David Scott's eyes. He's 92 years old, and he's been at some recent events. Again, look at the accoutrements on the helmet to shade things out of the way and so forth. And what a cool shot that Jim Irwin doesn't seem to have a camera in his hand. So I don't know if this is a selfie or not that possibly could have been done before we even thought about selfies. Yeah, it had been on his chest, so he just probably snapped that photo. And here's the whole frame that we chose as our background today, our intern Logan Cope from Eastern Florida State College. Love that picture. This is where Jim got off of the Lunar Rover, and Scott said, "Okay, I'll pick you up in about 10 minutes. Go out there and fine-tune those science experiments or whatever you were doing." So that's why they're deeper there, and then he walked away. They'll be there for millions and millions of years. Thank you, Doug Forrest, for letting us share your beautiful artwork. There's how to get a hold of Doug again, apollo-arts.com. And we appreciate your friend being our friend, and your wife, Yoshiko. She's been in our museum here, and they're raising a son together. These are some of his we honored the Apollo 1 crew on Apollo 11 landing July 20th with that piece of artwork of Doug's there. So go check him out. And if you're so inclined to buy yourself a gift or buy someone else a great gift for their birthday or Christmas is 5.5 months away. You won't miss that. We also talk about Doug and his Endeavour shuttle image that Marty takes around, has all the astronauts autographed there. So thank you all for another great show today. Doug is very appreciative that we're showcasing his artwork, and we appreciate you letting us show your artwork off, because it's truly become part of our program, just like you have, Doug. So best of luck to you there. Thank you, everybody else, for watching today on Stay Curious. Tomorrow, we've got Mikey Haddad, our payload specialist, is coming in with Tracy Gill. Both have been on our show today. They're going to talk about one of the shuttles of the month of July. They better hurry up because July ends tomorrow. And I forget which one they're going to talk about, but I know you will be wanting to stay curious about that, because Mikey Haddad is a payload specialist. He wrote a book about him, and he and his friends he bring in here really take us behind the scenes of putting those payloads in the space shuttle, and all of the challenges that they went through to make sure things worked right. So thanks again, everybody, for sharing Stay Curious with your friends. Tell us to like us on our Facebook page. We're approaching 12,000 Facebook followers, and you all know that's an important part of our outreach here at the American Space Museum. So until tomorrow, when we're going to talk about the space shuttle and payloads inside of them with Mikey Haddad and Tracy Gill. Until tomorrow, I'm Marquette saying thank you for watching today, and we can't wait to see you in our museum to bridge the space between us.